The library door was slightly ajar. That's what saved me, or ruined me, depending on how you look at it. I'd come to retrieve the estate's quarterly tax documents, same as I'd done 100 times before. My hand was already on the brass handle when I heard my wife laugh. Not her public laugh. Not the tinkling, rehearsed sound she made at charity galas. This was her real laugh, the one I hadn't heard directed at me in years. 3 months, Celeste said. Maybe 4. Mother's hospice nurse says the cancer is aggressive. I froze. My mother-in-law's diagnosis wasn't news to me, but the tone of my wife's voice was. She sounded relieved. And after she's gone? That was Preston Archer, the family's attorney for 20 years. Yale Law. Member of the same country club as the Whitmores. Everything I wasn't. We file for divorce. I get the inheritance. Martin gets his pathetic settlement from the prenup. What, $200,000? After 15 years of playing estate manager for my family? She snorted. He should be grateful. My chest tightened. 200,000. 15 years of my life, reduced to a number that wouldn't buy a decent house in Fairfield County. And then, Preston asked, and then you and I finally stop hiding. Her voice dropped lower, intimate. God, I'm so tired of pretending to love him. 15 years of watching him try so hard to belong. It's exhausting. Preston's laugh was low and ugly. Your mother always said you married beneath you. Mother was right about everything. Except you. She never knew about us. I stood there in the dim hallway, my hand still on that brass handle, and I felt something inside me shift. Not break. Shift. Like tectonic plates moving beneath the surface of the earth. Silent. Massive. Irreversible. I didn't burst through the door. Didn't confront them. That's what a stupid man would do. A man ruled by his emotions. A man who'd already lost. Instead, I stepped backward, slowly, carefully, making no sound on the Persian runner that lined the hallway. I walked to my home office in the East Wing, the small room they'd assigned me when I first moved in, the one Eleanor had made clear was sufficient for your needs. I sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and I started to think. 15 years, I whispered to the empty room. Let's see what 15 years of knowledge is worth. Here's the thing about being underestimated. It gives you room to operate. For 15 years, the Whitmore family had treated me as something between a servant and a curiosity. The son of a mechanic from Bridgeport who'd somehow captured their princess. They never let me forget it. Eleanor's tight smiles at holiday dinners. The way Celeste's cousins talked over me at family gatherings. The prenup that ensured I'd leave the marriage with almost nothing. But they'd also trusted me with everything. The investments, the tax strategies, the property management, the boring, essential work that kept their fortune growing while they attended benefits and summered in the Hamptons. They'd given the keys to the kingdom to a man they considered too simple to use them. The following Monday, I started my inventory. No private investigators, no dramatic confrontations. Just the methodical work I'd always been good at. The work they dismissed as beneath them. First, I pulled the credit card statements. Not mine. The family's corporate card that Preston used for estate-related expenses. The same card I reconciled every quarter. 4 years of hotel charges in Manhattan. The Ritz-Carlton. Always the same room. Always coinciding with dates when Preston had billed the estate for legal consultations in the city. I cross-referenced the dates with Celeste's calendar. Her Tuesday and Thursday charity board meetings. The drive time from our estate in Madison to Manhattan was 2.5 hours, The drive to the Ritz-Carlton from the charity's actual office was 45 minutes in the opposite direction. I didn't feel anything. Not yet. I was just gathering data. Next, I found the joint account. It was buried in Preston's billing records, a wire transfer fee of $1,500 to an offshore bank I'd never authorized. I traced it to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. The signatory on the account? Preston's brother-in-law, a man I'd never met. Over $2.3 million in legal fees over 15 years that didn't correspond to any actual legal work I could identify. A Delaware corporation that had received consulting payments from the estate. Its registered agent was, again, Preston's brother-in-law. Property valuations that had been manipulated to allow Preston to purchase a Whitmore-owned commercial building at 40% below market value. The man wasn't just sleeping with my wife, he was robbing my children's grandmother. I ran the numbers on his billing. By his own invoices, Preston Archer would have needed to work 400 days a year to justify his hours. The man had been stealing from the Whitmores for over a decade, and no one had noticed because no one had bothered to look. Why would they? He was one of them. That's when I pulled out the prenup and read it again. Really read it this time. Not as the nervous groom I'd been at 28, but as the estate manager who'd spent 15 years learning how wealthy families protect their assets. There it was. Paragraph 14, subsection C. In the event of dissolution due to proven marital infidelity by either party, the provisions of this agreement shall be considered void, and the division of assets shall proceed under applicable Connecticut state law. Celeste had an affair clause in her own prenup, and she'd apparently forgotten it existed. But here's what mattered more. Connecticut was an equitable distribution state. If I invoked the adultery clause and went to court, I'd spend years fighting for maybe a third of what Celeste stood to inherit. Millions in legal fees. My children's lives disrupted. And at the end of it, Celeste would still be Celeste. She'd land on her feet. She always did. That wasn't justice. That was just money. I needed something else. The phone call I made that night wasn't to a lawyer. It was to Deborah Walsh, a forensic accountant I'd worked with 7 years earlier on an estate tax matter. She'd been with the IRS for 20 years before going private, and she owed me a favor. I'd referred 3 high-net-worth clients to her after the Whitmore job. I need to meet, I said. Not at the house, not anywhere near Madison. That kind of meeting? She understood immediately. That kind of meeting. We met at a diner in New Haven the following Saturday. Deborah was 52, with gray-streaked hair and the kind of face that had spent decades making wealthy people uncomfortable. I slid the folder across the table. I've been managing my wife's family estate for 15 years. Last week, I found out the family attorney has been embezzling from them the entire time. Deborah flipped through the documents. Her eyebrows climbed higher with each page. You're telling me you've suspected this for how long? I didn't suspect. I trusted. That was my mistake. And now? I leaned forward. Now I want documentation that would hold up in court, or in front of a dying woman who cares more about her legacy than her daughter. Deborah studied me for a long moment. This is personal. Does that matter? It matters to me. She closed the folder. I don't help people destroy innocent lives for sport. The attorney is having an affair with my wife. Has been for 6 years. They're planning to push my mother-in-law into signing a power of attorney while she's on her deathbed, then simplify the will to cut my children out of their inheritance. Deborah's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes did. Your children. Oliver, 13. Emma, 11. She was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up the folder again. I'll need access to everything. Every document, every statement, every communication you can legitimately obtain. Done? And Martin? She waited until I met her eyes. Make sure you're doing this for the right reasons. Revenge is expensive. It costs more than money. I know, I said. I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this so my children don't grow up thinking their mother's behavior is normal. So they don't learn that people like Preston Archer can steal and lie and face no consequences. Deborah nodded slowly. Then we have work to do. November was busy. I installed a dash cam in Celeste's car, the one registered to the estate, which I managed, which made it entirely legal. I didn't follow her. I just collected data. Every Tuesday and Thursday she drove to Hartford. Every Tuesday and Thursday she parked at the same hotel. The timestamps told their own story. I saved everything to an encrypted external drive. Bank statements, billing records, timestamped GPS coordinates, phone records from the family's shared cloud backup. Celeste had never bothered to change the password I'd set up years ago. Why would she? I was just the help. But the real discovery came from somewhere I wasn't expecting. I was reviewing old estate documents, Eleanor's various trusts, property deeds, investment accounts, when I found a will I didn't recognize. Dated 2 years earlier. Prepared by an attorney named Gregory Hollister, not Preston Archer. Eleanor Whitmore had changed her will without telling anyone, without telling Preston. I read it 3 times to make sure I understood. 60% to Celeste, 40% directly to a trust for any grandchildren of the testator. My children were already protected. Eleanor, for all her coldness toward me, had loved Oliver and Emma from the moment they were born. She'd created a trust for them that Celeste couldn't touch. This changed everything. If I went to war with Celeste in divorce court, I'd be fighting over her 60%. But if I could convince Eleanor to change that 60%, to remove Celeste entirely, then my children would inherit the whole estate. And I would be their trustee. I wasn't playing for a settlement anymore. I was playing for everything. Celeste noticed the change in me by late November. I'd become agreeable, pleasant. I stopped arguing about her spending habits, her social calendar, her obvious lies about where she'd been. I helped with the children's homework. I managed the estate with quiet efficiency. I smiled at her across the dinner table. She was terrified. "He's acting strange," I heard her tell Preston during one of their calls. The cloud backup made these conversations remarkably easy to access. Agreeable. It's unsettling. Maybe he's finally accepted his place. Or maybe he knows something. Should I check his computer? Preston's laugh was dismissive. Don't be paranoid. Martin's not smart enough to be a threat. I almost laughed myself. Almost. Instead, I prepared for her search. I moved all the real evidence to my safe deposit box in New Haven. On my laptop, I left a decoy folder. Business plans for a small consulting firm. Research on starting over after divorce. A draft budget showing how I could survive on my prenup settlement. Let them think I'd given up. Let them think I was planning a quiet retreat. 2 days later, Celeste was noticeably more relaxed at dinner. She'd found exactly what I wanted her to find. "You seem tired lately," she said, almost kindly. It was the first gentle word she'd spoken to me in months. "Are you all right?" "Just thinking about the future," I said. "Making plans." She patted my hand. "That's healthy." I wanted to tell her that she had no idea. but I just smiled and passed the salt. The phone call came on a Wednesday evening in early December. "Mr. Blake?" The voice was soft, careful. "This is Rosalind Turner, from the estate." Rosalind had been Eleanor's housekeeper for 40 years. She'd watched Celeste grow up. She'd been kinder to me than anyone else in that house, always making sure there was coffee when I worked late, always asking after the children. "Rosalind, is something wrong? I need to speak with you, not at the house." We met at a coffee shop in Madison. Rosalind looked older than her 67 years, worn down by decades of keeping other people's secrets. "I should have told someone years ago," she said. Her hands trembled around her mug. "I found them together 6 years ago, in the pool house, your wife and Mr. Archer." 6 years. The affair was even older than I'd thought. "Why didn't you say anything?" "To whom?" Her voice cracked. "Mrs. Whitmore would have blamed me for speaking ill of her daughter. I would have lost my job, my pension, my home in the guest cottage. I told myself it wasn't my business." "What changed?" Rosalind looked around the coffee shop, then leaned closer. "Last week, I heard Mr. Archer talking on his phone about Mrs. Whitmore's medication schedule, about how easy it would be to manage things." My stomach dropped. "Manage things how?" He didn't say exactly, but the way he said it. She shook her head. "I've known that man for 20 years. I've never liked him. But I've also never been afraid of him. Not until now." This wasn't just about money anymore. Preston wasn't just planning to steal from Eleanor. He might be planning something far worse. "I need you to do something for me," I said. "I need you to document everything Preston does regarding Eleanor's care. Every visit, every conversation you overhear, every medication adjustment. Can you do that?" Rosalind's jaw tightened. "I've spent 40 years protecting that family, even when they didn't deserve it." She met my eyes. "It's time I protected the right people." I requested a meeting with Eleanor on December 15th. Celeste was suspicious immediately. "Why do you need to talk to my mother alone?" "Estate tax planning. Year-end matters. The boring things you've always trusted me to handle." She studied my face for signs of deception. I gave her nothing. I'd had 15 years of practice. "Fine," she said finally, "but don't tire her out. She needs her rest." Eleanor's private study was exactly as it had always been. Dark wood, leather chairs, the portrait of her late husband watching from above the fireplace. Eleanor herself sat in her usual chair, thinner than she'd been 6 months ago, but with the same sharp eyes that had judged me insufficient since the day we met. "You've never asked to see me privately, Martin, in 15 years. She gestured to the chair across from her. "So this must be important." "It is, Mrs. Whitmore, and I'm sorry it took me this long to come to you. I've never liked you, you know." She said it without malice, just stating a fact. "You were never good enough for my daughter." "I know." I sat down and met her gaze directly. "And I spent 15 years trying to prove you wrong. I managed your estate. I grew your investments by 32%. I protected your family's money from tax exposure that would have cost you millions. And I never asked for recognition. I did it because I loved your daughter." "Loved?" Eleanor's eyebrow arched. "Past tense?" "Past tense. Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "What changed?" I pulled the folder from my briefcase. 6 weeks ago, I overheard a conversation between Celeste and Preston Archer. They've been having an affair for 6 years. They're planning to divorce me after your death and use their relationship openly. Preston suggested they push you to sign a power of attorney now, while you're still alive. He also suggested simplifying your will to remove the trust you created for your grandchildren. Eleanor's face went pale. That's absurd. Preston would never. I have documentation. I opened the folder. Hotel receipts, phone records, photographs from the dash cam in Celeste's car. Witness testimony from someone who found them together years ago. I laid out the evidence of the affair first. Then I moved to the theft. This is the forensic accountant's report. I handed her Deborah's analysis. Over the past 15 years, Preston Archer has stolen more than $2 million from your estate through fraudulent billing, shell companies, and manipulated property valuations. He purchased a commercial building you owned at 40% below market value. He's been charging you for 400 billable days per year. Eleanor's hands shook as she turned the pages. This can't be right. I can walk you through every line item, every transaction. I've been managing these accounts for 15 years, Mrs. Whitmore. I know them better than anyone. Finally, I showed her Rosalind's statement. The overheard conversations about managing her medication, the plans to accelerate the power of attorney. Your housekeeper is prepared to testify, I said. She's terrified for you, for what Preston might be planning. Eleanor was silent for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was ice. Why bring this to me? Why not divorce her and take what you can? I leaned forward. Because this was never about money, Mrs. Whitmore. It was about respect. About being seen as something other than the help. And because your grandchildren, my children, deserve better than a mother who would steal their inheritance to give it to her lover. And what do you want? I want you to protect your grandchildren. That's all I've ever wanted. Eleanor's gaze bored into mine. For 15 years, she'd looked at me and seen a fortune hunter, an interloper, an insufficient man. Now, for the first time, she was really seeing me. I underestimated you, she said finally. That was my mistake. It was everyone's mistake. She almost smiled. Leave the documents with me. I need time to think. I stood to go. At the door, she called my name. Martin? I turned. Gregory Hollister, you found his will. It wasn't a question. I nodded. I changed it 2 years ago because I didn't trust Preston. I couldn't say why at the time, just a feeling. She looked at the folder in her hands. I should have listened to my feelings sooner. We both should have. 3 days later, Preston Archer walked into Eleanor's study expecting a routine year-end review. He found Eleanor, her attorney Gregory Hollister, and a court reporter. What is this? His smile was still confident, but I could see the cracks forming. This is a reckoning. Eleanor's voice was cold enough to freeze the Connecticut sound. Sit down, Preston. I wasn't in the room. Eleanor had asked me to wait in the hallway, but Rosalind told me everything afterward. First, Eleanor presented the evidence of the affair. Preston tried to deny it. Then she showed him the photographs, the timestamps, the hotel receipts. His face went gray. Then she presented Deborah's forensic analysis. $2.3 million in documented theft. Shell companies. Fraudulent billing. The property deal where he'd cheated the estate out of $600,000. This has been referred to the Connecticut Bar Association and the State Attorney General's office, Eleanor said. Your law license will be suspended pending investigation. I expect criminal charges to follow. Preston's composure finally shattered. He tried denial, then blame. Celeste seduced me, he said. I was weak, but she pursued me. Stop, Eleanor's voice could have cut glass. You came into my home. You stole from my family. You violated my trust, my daughter's marriage, and everything I thought I knew about you. And now you want to blame her? Eleanor, please. You'll address me as Mrs. Whitmore. We're no longer on a first-name basis. Preston left the estate white-faced and shaking. His hands trembled so badly he could barely grip his car keys. The next morning, Celeste was summoned to the study. I was there this time, Eleanor insisted. She wanted Celeste to see exactly who had brought her down. My wife walked in wearing her casual elegance, her charity lunch smile fixed in place. The smile died when she saw me sitting beside her mother. What's going on? Why is Martin here? Sit down, Celeste. Eleanor's voice was flat. We need to discuss your future. Or rather, your lack of one in this family. Mother, what are you talking about? Eleanor didn't waste words. She laid out the evidence of the affair. The evidence of Celeste's complicity in Preston's financial schemes. The recorded conversations about the power of attorney, about simplifying the will, about managing Eleanor's care. I recorded those calls? Celeste turned to me, her face twisted with fury. You spied on me? Connecticut is a one-party consent state, I said calmly. Every call made on a state property, which includes your phone, is legally recordable by any party to the call. You had no right. I had every right. I'm the estate manager. It's my job to protect the family's interests. I paused. I've been doing it for 15 years. I'm just better at it now. Eleanor cut in before Celeste could respond. As of this morning, you've been removed from my will entirely. The estate will pass directly to Oliver and Emma, held in trust until they reach 25. Martin will serve as sole trustee. Celeste went white. Mother, you can't. I can. Gregory drew up the new documents this morning. They've already been signed and witnessed. But I'm your daughter. You were my daughter. Eleanor's voice cracked for the first time. I raised you to be better than this. I gave you everything. Education, opportunity, a name that opened every door. And this is what you did with it? An affair with your family's lawyer? Stealing from your own inheritance? Planning to cut your children out of their grandmother's will? Mother, I can explain. You can't. Eleanor stood up, despite the pain it clearly cost her. You'll receive a one-time payment of $50,000. That's your inheritance. Martin will handle the paperwork for your divorce. Celeste turned to me, her eyes blazing. You did this. You poisoned her against me. I told her the truth. I stood to face my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife. Something neither of us has done in years. She lunged at me. Actually lunged, her manicured nails going for my face. Gregory Hollister caught her arm before she made contact. That's assault, Mrs. Blake. His voice was mild. I'd recommend against adding criminal charges to your current difficulties. Celeste wrenched free. She looked at her mother, at me, at the attorney, searching for an ally, finding none. You'll regret this, she said finally. All of you. Perhaps. Eleanor sat back down heavily. But I doubt it will be as much as I regret the choices I made in raising you. Celeste left without another word. I never saw her in that house again. The next 6 months moved fast. Preston's law license was suspended in January. By March, the state attorney general had filed criminal charges: embezzlement, fraud, breach of fiduciary duty. 3 other families came forward with similar complaints. Preston had been running this scheme for 2 decades. The Whitmores were just his biggest mark. He tried to negotiate. offered testimony against other corrupt lawyers in his network. It wasn't enough. The prosecution pushed for the maximum sentence. Celeste's downfall was slower, but no less complete. Cut off from family money, she tried to maintain her social position. She maxed out her last credit card attending events she was no longer invited to chair. She tried to borrow from friends, the same friends who had smiled at her for years, who had laughed at her jokes and complimented her taste. They stopped returning her calls. She moved in with Preston before his assets were seized. A week after they were, she moved out again. I filed for divorce on January 8th, citing adultery and invoking the prenup clause. Celeste couldn't afford a decent lawyer. The man she'd thought would protect her was under federal indictment. The proceedings took 90 days. I received primary custody of Oliver and Emma. Celeste got supervised visitation. The judge cited concerns about her association with a criminal defendant. She was allowed to see her children every other Saturday, in the presence of a court-appointed supervisor. She missed half her scheduled visits in the first 3 months. Oliver took it harder than Emma. He was 13, old enough to understand what had happened, but not old enough to process it. "Dad?" He found me in the kitchen late one night, unable to sleep. "Why did Mom do it?" I set down my coffee. "I don't know, son. Sometimes people make choices that hurt the people they're supposed to love." "Are you angry?" I thought about it. Really thought. I was, for a while. But now I'm just focused on taking care of you and your sister. That's what matters. He sat down across from me. "Grandma says you saved us. That if you hadn't found out about Mr. Archer, we might have lost everything. Your grandmother is being kind." A phrase I never thought I'd say about Eleanor Whitmore. I just did what I should have done years ago. I paid attention. But nobody else paid attention. Nobody else noticed. Oliver looked at me with something new in his eyes. Something like respect. "You did." "I'm your father," I said simply. "It's my job to protect you." He didn't say anything else. He just nodded and went back to bed. But the next morning, he asked if I'd teach him about the estate's finances, about how the investments worked, how the trusts were structured, how to spot discrepancies in billing statements. I started his education that weekend. Eleanor died in late June. The cancer had given her roughly 6 months, and she'd used every day of it. She'd rebuilt her will 3 times, always with Oliver and Emma at the center. She'd fired every service provider Preston had recommended and brought in new accountants, new property managers, new attorneys. She'd made Rosalind an executor of her estate, a decision that scandalized what remained of her social circle. "They think I've lost my mind," she told me one afternoon in April, "leaving so much responsibility to the help. You're leaving it to people you trust. The same people I overlooked for 40 years. She shook her head. "I thought I knew how to judge character. Turns out I only knew how to judge pedigree." In her final weeks, Eleanor asked me to bring the children to see her. She'd been a distant grandmother at best, always correct, never warm. But something had changed since Christmas. Or maybe it had changed in her, unlocked by the knowledge that her time was short. "I wasn't a good grandmother," she told Oliver and Emma, her voice weak but clear. "I was too focused on appearances, on legacy, on things that don't matter." "You gave us the lake house," Emma said. She was holding Eleanor's hand. "We had good times there." "You had good times despite me, not because of me." Eleanor squeezed Emma's fingers. "I want you to know something, both of you. Your father is a good man, a better man than I gave him credit for. I was wrong about him, and I was too proud to admit it for 15 years. Oliver glanced at me. I kept my face neutral. I want you to learn from my mistakes, Eleanor continued. Don't judge people by where they come from. Judge them by what they do, by how they treat the people who can do nothing for them. Your father understood that. I didn't. She gave Oliver her father's watch, a Patek Philippe that had been in the family for 4 generations. Your great-great-grandfather was a dock worker, she said. He bought this watch when his shipping company made its first profit, to remind himself where he came from. Don't ever forget where your family really comes from, Oliver. Not the mansions and the trusts. The work. To Emma, she gave a sealed letter. Open it on your 18th birthday. Not before. What's in it? Emma asked. Advice I wish someone had given me when I was young. Eleanor smiled faintly. Probably advice you'll ignore. That's your right. But someday, when you're old and full of regrets like me, you might remember what I wrote. And maybe it will help. Eleanor died 3 weeks later, peacefully, with Rosalind and the hospice nurse at her bedside. Celeste was not present. She'd been informed, but hadn't responded. The funeral was elegant and restrained, exactly as Eleanor would have wanted. Celeste showed up finally, in a black dress I didn't recognize. She stood at the back of the church and left before the reception. She didn't speak to me. She didn't speak to the children. The $47 million Whitmore estate passed to a trust for Oliver and Emma, with me as sole trustee. Rosalind received a $500,000 bequest and lifetime residence in the guest cottage. A decision that, I'm told, Eleanor's remaining relatives found incomprehensible. But then, they'd never understood Eleanor. Not really. None of us had. Preston's trial concluded in September. 4 years in federal prison for embezzlement and fraud. He tried to make eye contact with me as they let him out. I looked away. Some people aren't worth the attention. Celeste had waited for him for 6 months after his assets were seized. 6 months in a cramped apartment, her social circle reduced to nothing, her inheritance spent. Then she met a hedge fund manager at a bar in Stamford, a man with enough money to fund her lifestyle and enough arrogance to think he could handle her. She married him 8 months after our divorce was finalized. She did not invite the children. I heard through mutual acquaintances that the marriage was rocky from the start. The hedge fund manager had a temper. Celeste had expensive habits. The combination was predictable. I didn't follow the details. I had more important things to focus on. 2 years after Eleanor's death, I received a letter from an attorney I didn't recognize. Inside was a handwritten note, dated 3 weeks before Eleanor passed. Martin, I've instructed my attorney to send you this after my death. I want you to know something I couldn't say while I was alive. I knew about Celeste and Preston before you told me. Rosalind told me 3 years ago. I did nothing because I couldn't face it. Because admitting my daughter's betrayal meant admitting my own failure as a mother. I told myself I would deal with it eventually. I waited and waited and waited. You gave me the courage I lacked. You gave me permission to act. I spent my whole life believing that family was about blood and legacy. You showed me it's about character. You were always good enough for my family. My family was never good enough for you. Protect my grandchildren. They are the best of us. Eleanor. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer next to the watch Eleanor had given Oliver and the sealed letter she'd given Emma. Some inheritances are more valuable than money. The Whitmore estate looked different now. Not physically. The house was the same Georgian mansion it had always been, set on 12 acres of manicured Connecticut countryside. But the atmosphere had changed. The oppressive formality was gone. The sense that every room was a museum, not a home. Oliver had taken over the third-floor study as his own. He was 17 now, applying to architecture programs, covering the walls with blueprints and 3D models of buildings he wanted to design someday. Emma had claimed the old conservatory for her art. 15 years old and already showing real talent. She painted the view from the windows, the gardens in different seasons, the light falling across the property at various times of day. Eleanor's portrait still hung in the library, but Emma had added her own. A painting of her grandmother as a young woman, based on photographs from the estate archives. "She looks different here," Emma said when she showed me the finished work. "Softer, before she got so hard." "People change," I said. "Sometimes for the worse, sometimes for the better." "Which did she do?" "Both. At different times." I put my arm around my daughter's shoulders. "The important thing is that she changed back before the end. Not everyone gets that chance." Rosalind still lived in the guest cottage, though I'd offered her an apartment in the main house. She preferred her independence. Most days she came up to cook dinner. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. The kitchen was her domain, and she'd finally inherited it. And then there was Laura. I met her at a school event 2 years after the divorce. She was a pediatrician, widowed young, raising a daughter on her own. We talked for 20 minutes by the refreshment table and discovered we'd both spent years in marriages where we were invisible. "My husband was a good man," she said. "But he never really saw me. I was the person who managed the house, raised our daughter, kept everything running. He loved me, I think. But he didn't know me." "My wife knew me perfectly," I said. "She just didn't care." Laura laughed. It was a real laugh, unguarded and warm. We had coffee the next week, dinner the week after that. By our third date, I knew I wanted to see where this could go. I introduced her to the children after 6 months. They were skeptical at first, Oliver especially. He'd become protective of our little family, wary of outsiders. But Laura didn't try too hard. She didn't force closeness or pretend to be their mother. She just showed up, listened, asked about their lives and remembered the answers. By the time she moved in, 2 years after we met, Oliver was asking her for advice on his college applications, and Emma was teaching her to paint. "You're not what I expected," Oliver told Laura one evening, when he thought I couldn't hear. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone trying to replace Mom, I guess." "I can't replace your mother." Laura's voice was gentle. "I wouldn't want to. What happened between your parents is their story, not mine. I'm just here because I love your dad, and I'd like to be part of your family. If you'll have me." Oliver was quiet for a moment. "Dad's different now, happier. Since you came. He makes me happy too." "Good." Another pause. "That's good." I didn't mention that I'd overheard. Some conversations are better left private. The last time I saw Celeste was at Oliver's high school graduation. She'd been invited. Oliver had insisted, despite my reservations. But she almost didn't come. Her second marriage had ended badly. The hedge fund manager had left her for a younger woman, taking most of his money with him. Celeste was living in a small apartment in White Plains now, working as a receptionist at a real estate agency. Poetic justice, some might say. I just found it sad. She sat in the back of the auditorium, alone, watching our son give the valedictorian speech. He talked about legacy, about what we inherit from our families, and what we choose to build on our own. My grandmother used to say that family was about blood and legacy, Oliver said. For a long time, I thought that meant money, properties, names on buildings. But she was wrong about that. So was I. He looked out at the audience. At me and Laura in the front row, Emma between us. At Rosalind, crying quietly, clutching a handkerchief. At Celeste, hiding in the shadows. Family is about the people who show up, who do the work, even when nobody's watching, who protect you, even when you don't deserve it. Oliver paused. My father taught me that. He's the reason I'm standing here today. Not because he gave me money or opportunities or a name, because he gave me an example of what a good man looks like. I didn't cry, but it was close. After the ceremony, Celeste found me in the crowd. She looked tired, worn down. The years had not been kind. He's remarkable, she said. Our son. Yes. I can't take any credit for that, can I? You gave birth to him, raised him for 13 years. Those things matter. Celeste shook her head. We both know what kind of mother I was, what kind of wife. She met my eyes for the first time in years. I don't expect you to forgive me. I'm not sure I've forgiven myself, but I wanted you to know. I see now. What you did. Why you did it. I protected my children. You did more than that. She glanced over at Laura, at Emma, at the life I'd built in the ruins of our marriage. You built something real. Something I never could have given you. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Take care of them, Celeste said. Oliver and Emma. I know you will, but take care of them. Always. She walked away. I never saw her again. The evening after graduation, I sat on the porch of the Whitmore estate, watching the sunset paint the Connecticut sky in shades of orange and gold. Laura brought me a cup of coffee and settled into the chair beside me. What are you thinking about? About how I spent 15 years trying to prove I belonged here. And now? I looked at the house behind us, at Oliver's blueprints visible through the third-floor window, at Emma's paintings in the conservatory, at the gardens Rosalind had been tending for 4 decades, finally her own. Now I know the truth, I said. I was the one who made this a home. Laura took my hand. Any regrets? I thought about it. The years of silence, the overheard conversation, the methodical collection of evidence, the careful planning, the confrontation with Eleanor, the way everything had fallen into place. Not through luck, but through patience, through paying attention, through being the kind of man they always underestimated. No, I said, not anymore. Oliver came out to join us, Emma trailing behind. They sprawled on the porch steps, arguing good-naturedly about something, a movie, a song, some reference I didn't catch. Normal, happy, safe. I'd spent 15 years earning my place at this table. Turns out I'd been building something else entirely. I'd been building this moment, this family, this life, and it was worth every year I'd waited.